Good evening, Bill Wadman.
Good evening, Sandy Robertson.
And what is it like over there in Brooklyn today?
50 degrees Fahrenheit and gray and a little foggy.
Oh, well, it has been blistering sunshine here today.
Well, you know what? We'll all move to England then.
I think you ought to, for other reasons. How-
We've considered it, believe me.
This evening we're going to talk about ridicule.
Okay. How it
Not just
pertains to America.
not just because it does pertain perhaps to the American condition, but because I wonder if it's something we all experience. And whether we perceive ourselves to be ridiculed or ridiculer.
Okay. Ridiculer or ridiculee?
Hmm. Have you been ridiculed in your life, Bill?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Oh, so you're going to make me go in the depths of my psyche?
Straight away, within the first 3 minutes.
uh, you know, lots of people have dismissed me for all kinds of annoying reasons. Um, I mean, I'm certainly, I think I was made fun of all the time for being me, dismissed. I was thrown away. I was not even for things I did. Is there a difference between being ridiculed for something that you actually did or for being ridiculed for something people think you are?
No, I think the ridicule is probably the same because it sounds from the same point, doesn't it? I mean, ridicule is
Yeah.
designed, it's a weapon to humiliate, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I told you about the time I was in a class at Berkeley, a synthesis class, and we had to make up, it was a sound design class, and then we had to write a composition with the sounds. And I wrote this, made these sounds, and I wrote this song, and I played in front of the class. And my teacher told me that I should just quit the music business because I'm a no talent hack in front of the whole class. And I was at the school on a composition scholarship. But this guy just ripped me apart in front of the whole class. Humiliating. It's pretty bad.
Was there a design in that though that was something other than what it felt like at the time?
From his
Mm.
point of view,
Yeah.
I have no idea. You think he was trying to encourage me in some weird way?
Well, I mean, it's not that I would advocate for that at all, but I do wonder the very sort of it's very modernistic, isn't it, to ridicule for purposes of progress.
Yeah, this will help you.
Yeah, I mean, also
Would you ever use that as a teacher?
never, never.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I mean, I find myself really feeling very strongly about it. And as a teacher, I do open myself to ridicule every day. It's, round the other way for me, in that I'm acutely
Sure.
aware that I can be a figure of fun. And certainly when I was a younger teacher and less confident in my ability to teach, forget scrap ability to teach, actually, let's say simply my ability to be easy with other people. Again,
Sure.
scrap that. That probably sounds strange in the American context. I mean, with ease, to meet people with ease in the way that I do now.
A
When
lot of that was just experience, you think?
I think it's experience, but I'm very conscious that as a young teacher, particularly, I was very open to ridicule everything about me and things that, I guess would have been had I been bullied, for example, when I was little, I guess it would have been like classroom or playground tactics. I wasn't aware ever of that happening when I was young, but I was very aware as a young teacher that that kind of um politics actually in
Is by from students or other teachers?
both actually, but
Yeah.
particularly from students. I mean, I was very young. I looked very young. I sounded different to everybody else. My accent was strange. I suppose I wore probably quite unusual clothes, not in an art teacher way, but just in a kind of maybe a misfit with how I looked to how I dressed.
Hmm.
There are lots of things I think would have been torn down. And I perceive that less now. I'm not saying that I no longer am ridiculed, but I think a lot of teachers are very open to being ridiculed. And so to be a teacher who is the person that ridicules seems strange to me. My role is absolutely to support and uplift, um,
Yeah.
and to inquire with others, not in any way to
Tear down.
humiliate them.
Yeah.
I can feel myself getting quite angry thinking about that, actually, that a
Yeah.
student would be torn down. That seems to be the ultimate abuse of power, really.
Power.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Anyway, it is a social weapon.
Yep.
It is something that, as I said at the beginning, I think we all experience in one way or another. But I'm looking at the many ways in which we might ridicule without being wholly aware of the consequence of ridicule. And sometimes I think we believe ourselves to be being funny and smart in ridiculing others, and actually we are revealing ourselves in the most unflattering way.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well, I mean, theoretically, it is a position of weakness that you're doing it from, right? Ultimately.
yes, but at the same time, it's also incredibly attractive to be the person who is ridiculing. If you think about
Sure. I mean, it's a power thing, right? Yeah.
right, I mean, how many people have you known in your life who you would class as a bully? And how many of those people are people who use ridicule to sustain their power?
Yeah. I mean, that's 70% of people. It's the rare person who's not using that, right?
And even in really like what I would think of as like high thinking or high
Sure. Yep.
professions, there's the ad absurdo, the kind of uh, what's it called, like the ridicule fallacy
Sure.
that seems to be such a popular, almost mindless way of trying to dominate.
Well, it works.
It does, and
What's really
even then,
sad is how successful it is what's frustrating. Yeah.
it is. I want us to watch ourselves when we encounter things that we rush to ridicule. And I'm speaking to you as my friend, and you are an American, and you are in the US now, and I'm very conscious every day that our press here in the UK presents the US now as a joke in many ways.
Sure.
And
Yep.
I'm super interested in how I approach that. My default is to go along with this sense of making fun of those idiots over there,
Sure.
right? And then I catch myself and I think, what am I doing? Why am I doing that?
Well, it's also such a small minority, right? It's also the idea that millions get pegged with
Bill, I
the
didn't
actions of a
kind of
few. Yeah.
you glitched there. Could you say that again?
I was just saying that it's interesting how we also paint with such a wide brush that there's 300 million people in America, and it's the actions of a handful that can wipe away anything else anybody else is doing.
Sure, but also it's almost like that's not even the point. The
Yeah.
point would be more that how many of us rush to ridicule, even when
Yeah.
we believe ourselves to be these kind people, good people. We believe
Sure.
ourselves to be righteous in some way, and isn't that part of the problem? I mean, this is a kind of neat example, I think. It does the thing that I think a lot of people who are not American do about America, right?
Right.
And I'm questioning myself in why I would ever do it. Because, yes, there's a sense of idiocy that is amusing. But to be amused in this way is actually a dangerous kind of rhetoric, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't think it doesn't lead anywhere. It's sort of it's a cul-de-sac.
Oh, it does lead somewhere. I mean, I think this is actually going to be my fundamental revelation for myself is that I think it does lead somewhere. I think that if we look at how a genocide is
Oh,
what
sure. Yes. I mean,
grounded.
I'm saying it doesn't lead to anywhere good, is the idea. But yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, for people looking at this, Jesse Kelly, I have no idea who this is. I actually just typed into Google the other week.
I have no idea
Um,
who he is either.
no, it was just an example. I clicked
Yeah.
in Google Images for ridicule in either art, photography, or something, and this image came up.
Doesn't even make really any that much sense, but okay. Yeah.
It doesn't, but it sums up this like I think of like lazy ridicule
Yep.
that that means that we are teaching ourselves a new way to separate that's not constructive.
Yeah.
Um,
Do we really even need to compare European and American art and architecture as some sort of one has to be better than the other?
well, yes, and I think that's I can't remember where I put it now, but I did write it down something about comparison. You know, comparison seems to be the lifeblood of how we relate.
Yeah.
And it's such a shame, isn't it, that that's
Yeah.
what we've got with which to be meaningful to each other,
Yep.
is simply to be caught in this web of comparison. Mm, anyway, I mean, I'm aware that ridicule, as far as I can tell, is a negative thing. But I was looking also then at things like the shame poles or the ridicule poles, uh, in like totem poles from First Nations or Native American culture. And this is the Tlingit indigenous people of Alaska. This is the Seaward ridicule pole, and it was made in response to a visiting Secretary of State in the 1880s.
I do
Um,
believe it's Seward.
Seward, oh, we would say
Yep.
Seaward,
Yep.
um, who came and didn't respond in the right way to the hospitality he received from the
Sure.
Tlingit people. And so they shamed him publicly. And this totem pole stands at the center of the place where this happened. And, people would gather or see it and be reminded of a kind of moral value. It's part of like a North Star, like a sort of this is the right way to do things because we're learning from other people's um poor manners or
Mistakes. Yeah.
whatever it would be as mistakes.
But it's also, I mean, that is also has its own control element, right? If within their society.
Yes, and again, it's, I suppose, separating because it's showing someone up to be righteous in oneself. And I'm struggling with that a bit, and I'm sure I must do it, but I'm not conscious of it. Yeah, I see it all the time, and it worries me because I feel that we live in such dangerous times. And I mean, of course, you will tell me that I'm a woo-woo hippie,
Go
but
ahead.
I do sort of feel like we could really use looking at what it means to unite, which is dangerous, but also to separate, which is dangerous. And when
Mhm.
we shame or ridicule, we are doing both those things. So, I mean, there's a paradox here, isn't there? But um, what am I getting at? Human behavior is so tricksy with this because we feel like we must stick together. But if we're sticking together, it means somebody's on the outside of that.
Yeah, I mean, the in-group, out-group thing is a basic part of human psychology. I think that I don't know that humans will ever quite get away from. You can redefine who's in and who's out, but in everyone's mind, there will always be somebody who's in and who's somebody who's out. There will always be those two camps.
Have you ever been the person who's been out?
Oh, yeah.
Right. Have you ever been the person who's been in?
Very rarely, but yes.
But when you have,
Hmm.
what has that done to your position to those who haven't been in with you?
Um, it's weird. Sometimes it's you get ridiculed back, right? You know that you're part of a thing. But sometimes actually people look up to you because it's like, oh, you're inside and I'm outside. You must be worthy of that in a way that I'm not, and therefore, uh, uh, which is weird because that's exactly the opposite of what you think would happen. But it's surprising how people's brains go there. Um, I found myself on the outs far more than I've been on the ins.
Mm.
But that's just because I've been kind of a non-joiner loner kind of person who, I went to college in the early 90s and I don't drink. This was not a inclusive time for Bill Wadman. Um, but yeah,
I wonder what that taught you though, like the life skill of being almost like the life skill of being the shamed.
yeah. Well, I will tell you that even the times when I am in our parlance, it's usually not me making that distinction, and I'm not trying to be in, and I also do not. I try very hard not to judge the people who, for whatever reason, are not in. You know.
But aren't we trapped in a cycle of this?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I might be shamed and somebody will be shaming me,
Mhm.
but they also might be trapped in a kind of like a shame cycle.
Sure. I mean, look at America is a country of immigrants. Tomorrow is St. Patrick's Day. You know how Irish Americans were once considered the bottom of the totem pole or the top of the totem pole, depending on how you look at it. But the bottom rung of like the dirty immigrants who didn't you couldn't understand what they were saying, who worked crappy jobs, who drank all the time, blah blah blah. But now Irish Americans are a big part of what America is, and a lot of them look down on whoever is, I don't know, people from Mexico or Central America or whatever it is, right? There's always like reconfiguring where you fit on this, on some sort of continuum, you know?
Sure. So, I mean, ridicule is a hierarchy.
Yeah. But it's a tool both for maybe motivation and for punishment.
Mm. I do find it also strange that it's an emotional response, ridicule,
Oh, sure.
whereas, it's not a logical response, it's an emotional response.
Yeah, it's a fight or flight kind of thing, I think.
Hmm.
I mean, I think ultimately there's a deep fear that somehow it means your survival. If I'm on the outs, I'm not near the fire, I don't get food, you know?
Mm.
Oh God, this was pretty bad though. Come on.
Well, I put it here because, I don't know anybody who's seen this that hasn't either wept or laughed about it. But certainly everyone has made fun of it, however gently.
Yeah.
We've all made fun of this.
Yep.
And I'm I'm curious, the old lady, for those people who don't know, this is in Borja in northeastern Spain. And it's a fresco that is by Elias Garcia Martinez. It's not really ancient, but it's a fresco. It's in a church. And it's classed as a piece of, heritage for that place and that artist. And anyway, somebody within the local community realized that the fresco was becoming quite damaged and a volunteer, an old lady, maybe I think in her 80s, took it upon herself to go in and to restore the original fresco. And the image you see on the right is this person's attempt to restore and revive the original fresco. Of course, the people responsible for, whatever the equivalent of like Heritage Spain or whatever that came in and were then coming to check and see how she got on, discovered this. And I mean, the fact is since this has happened, that place has had more interest
Yeah.
than it probably ever did
It's
when,
like negative interest though, right? It's interest of people who are what's the term you use when you're looking out the window, slowing down because there's an accident? Lollygagging.
yeah, but Is there ever a time when ridicule is a positive thing?
Well, there's some people in the world that I would ridicule right now, but I think they actually deserve to be ridiculed.
Oh, Bill, that's so dangerous. Tell us about it.
Well, I think there's a lot of people in America who would ridicule these particular people at the moment.
Well,
But it is so, I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's at what point is there a point at which someone, even if you don't believe in ridicule, requires ridicule in order to stay in check?
I mean, to feel humiliated.
Shame, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm just looking at shame though as this currency for something that ultimately we might want to be positive outcome,
Hmm.
and wondering if there could ever be a positive outcome really from something that is fundamentally so negative as
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I just, at a certain point, if nothing else works. By the way, did they repair this? Do you know?
I don't know actually.
God, I hope she used materials that could be removed.
Well, but I mean, looking at this and having the sort of reaction of ridicule is still tempered with a kind of admiration, I suppose. So somebody would be so certain that what they were doing was right. You know, there's a kind of admiration for foolishness sometimes, isn't there?
Sure.
I mean, could anybody look at this and think this is going really well?
Apparently she did. Maybe she needed glasses.
Well, I don't know. I know that neoclassical painting is really unfashionable, but I love this painting.
No, it's pretty. What's wrong with neoclassical painting? The
It's
subject
very,
matter or the actual work?
very uncool. Look at me with my ridicule. I also think that this is such a fascinating thing to do as an individual is to check yourself in your day to day where you find the impulse to make fun of things
Yeah.
and to question yourself when it happens. What is really going on for me when I do that? In my case, I've just said, oh, it's very unfashionable, it's very uncool to like neoclassical painting. And that's born out of, I guess, a desire to think I'm more, cutting edge, which is a joke. Of course, I'm not cutting edge. I'm an art history buff. I'm like the least cool person in the queue. But
Yep.
um, it, it's a self-consciousness, isn't it? That I should try
Sure.
and qualify my love of this painting by saying, oh, I know it's not cool. Like I'm trying to mitigate the shame that might be bestowed upon me from those people who are so much more knowledgeable or much more in tune with the lifeblood of contemporary or ultra contemporary practice right now, blah, blah.
Well, also for people our age, doing the thing that is not cool is also in its way cool.
Well, yeah, and I think that's part of a kind of Gen X credo.
Yeah.
But
Which
even
which no
that,
one else quite understands.
no, but even that, look at that, Bill, that way of saying it. Oh, here I am identifying us as Gen X, and then you're saying nobody else understands it. That puts us in a position where potentially one, can be ridiculed easily for being that
Oh yeah.
generation.
People ridicule Gen X all the time
But
nowadays on social medias. Yeah.
it also means that we're in a position to ridicule those people that aren't part of that generation.
Sure. Absolutely. I saw a kid the other day. There's one of those, those YouTube videos where they have people listening to music they haven't listened to ever. There was some kid. He's just like, I'm a music producer, been doing it for 10 years, whatever. I'm going to listen to this record everyone keeps telling me about called Revolver by the Beatles. And I'm like, you're a music producer and you've never listened to the Beatles? And then another one, I've listened to this album that people say is really good called Dark Side of the Moon. It's like you like there was a thing that my wife sent me the other day about a bunch of Gen Z kids listening to Radiohead The Bends for the first time because it's been 30 years. And
But
like not that everyone can listen to everything, but it's just it is interesting. I don't know. It's
isn't this isn't this your bombast talking?
yeah, maybe. You
Right.
know, I haven't listened to everything, but I just think that I think that there's a generational shift to sort of labeling yourself an expert in things that you haven't even experienced yet, you know. Maybe that's its own sort of generational ridicule that I'm playing.
Yes.
But mostly but I feel that way almost in retaliation for feeling ridiculed by the fact that, we're old and stodgy and don't want to sell out and blah, blah, blah. You know, yeah, it all plays into exactly what you're saying.
I mean,
Why is this uncool now, but wasn't 150 years ago?
but there's also, uh, well, the thought's gone out of my head, but
Sorry.
it's okay. Well, look at me. I could make fun of myself all day long. Perimenopausal women. What what is more culturally hilarious in
You
the
can't think of anything.
I am just a mindless nitwit.
It's amazing what hormones can do.
Yes, also the other thing, that's what I was going to say. In all our many conversations, I do know that you and I both use derision as a way to try and assert our authority in our conversation. And I do this as your friend and you do this as my friend.
Hmm.
And so even if you and I are
You mean
friends,
towards each other?
we do it towards each other all the time. If you watch back
Sure,
what we've done in the past and even our
sure.
conversation up to now, in this episode, we are using these subtle forms of put down and false elevation and all kinds of little
Hmm.
rhetorical quirks to try and assert our
Dominance.
our dominance, our smarts, whatever it is. If even you and I are doing that, what hope have we got
And
for
we're
the
tr-
rest of
and we
humanity?
are aware of it more than other people seem to be, just because it doesn't seem like a lot of people are thinking or talking about this quite this way most
No,
of the
anyway,
time.
the reason why I put this here actually is I don't know if you know about sort of late 18th century history. You probably do, Mr. Polymath. But this painting was, yes, portrait of young women in white, but we can tell by her clothing that she would have been one of Les Merveilleuses, the marvelous ones, the
Hmm.
female equivalent of the Incroyable, the Incredibles, who were the young people, the offspring of those guillotined in the Reign of Terror.
It's sort of the late 18th century Brat Pack.
Yes, absolutely. And so there was this subculture in France at that time that was in direct reaction to the actions of Robespierre, who by the time this is painted himself had been seen off.
Hmm.
Um, but their whole existence, the whole subculture was built on essentially the ridicule and the derision of what had happened to their parents,
Sure.
or not their parents as such, but the kind of the horror, I suppose, that one would feel about a whole generation of aristocrats being beheaded was met by this hyper erotic, totally scandalous mode of being for these young people who retained their wealth often and were just a young, as you say, brat pack. The burning contempt for what had happened gave rise to their pleasure.
Yeah.
And so, in one way, their hardship, the system that had orphaned them, became a vehicle for their purpose. And their purpose was connected for me to a sense of ridicule. They would not be shamed, but
But to
They,
some extent, their fame was connected was because of that ridicule.
yes. And so this painting for me is a kind of perfect encapsulation of the idea that, shame has layers, and it also has, it's omnidirectional. So it can come at you whilst it's coming from you. It can be about you whilst being adjacent to you. It's part of who you are, yet it's nothing to do with what you think you are.
Right.
Um, anyway, by the way, can I just point out in this painting, a
Hmm.
lot of the young women in this particular pack of young people it was very fashionable for them to don beautiful dresses for parties. But it was customary at the time to try and make oneself look like a goddess. And
Sure.
so they would often soak their dresses before going out. So they would become sheer and they could drape in a particular way that made them look more like the marbles that they would see in the
It's
hallowed
pretty
hall
cool.
of their forebears. It is, I mean, there's something particularly beautiful about the folds of fabric with then this meeting of the white gown, the diaphanous nature. You can just see the nipple through
Yeah.
the right breast. It's so delicate and beautiful. And to
I
be
mean,
able to,
yeah, I mean, just even the way the hair is painted is just very well done.
yes, but she is totally contemptuous.
Sure. Little
Um,
wise ass.
anyway, I hope not to make fun, but I'm aware that ridicule is fun.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem is that it doesn't have to be malice to feel superior. You could just feel that you're right and somebody else is wrong.
Hmm. I'm also aware that, my foolishness may result in ridicule,
Sure.
but acting the fool might reveal your foolishness for me to ridicule
Yeah.
you.
Sure. I mean, listen, the Operation Mincemeat musical that I told you to go see. I
Mm,
mean, there's a song where they're dressed up as Nazis saying all this sort of, crazy, oh, we're the Ubermensch, blah, 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 blah.
mm.
And it's like ultimately they're just ridiculing 1940s Germans in that scene. And they feel and everyone laughs and it's okay to do that because they were such a horrible, did such horrible things that, that's still okay.
Is there ever any kindness in laughter, Bill?
I don't know. That's a good question. Or is it always a little sinister?
Mm. I might find myself laughing and then find myself laughing at. My mum always used to say, "Are you laughing at or laughing with Sandy?"
Yeah,
And of course, I would say, "I'm laughing with that person, mum."
sure.
But really, really scrutinizing it and into adulthood, I realized that my laughter is cruel.
Hmm.
And
Always.
even if it's not cruel overtly, like I'm laughing at that person over there who's experiencing some misfortune, there's still a sense that through laughter one seeks dominance.
Sure. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Put people in their place.
Gosh, we're a tricksy bunch, aren't we?
We're so mean.
Ah, how mean can we possibly get, though, Bill? That is the question.
You and I, pretty mean.
And on that happy thought, I shall bid you good night.
Thank you very much, Sandy.